Just as a heads up before we start, there were actually supposed to be 3 books being reviewed today. Now, because I edited my regular intro a little while ago, I don't know. No, I didn't edit. I filmed my regular intro a little while ago. I don't know if I can edit around that to make it clear that there are only going to be 2 left. Could I refilm the intro? Yes. Am I going to? No. Because basically my brain has not been my friend recently, and I wasn't able to make sure I read all 3 in time for me getting a review out this week. I am filming and editing this on the day it is coming out, so yeah, there was no way I could have finished that. I tried finishing it yesterday, it just wasn't working, so I just scripted the reviews for the 2 books I had. I was also meant to have been doing this how I've previously done sort of multi-book videos, sort of like I did with the Iron Maiden one, like I've done with the blind date with the book, where I come to it once I finished it. But like I said, my brain has not been my friend, so you're getting 2, but you're still getting 2. Oh, and friendly reminder that because you have seen this look before, the look that is in the intro, the regular intro part, was a test for a look that was so much better on the night. Roll the actual intro, shall we? Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Yes, I look a little bit ridiculous right now, but I am filming right after the video for this time next year, and I thought I'd test out the makeup that I'm going to do tomorrow for New Year, because I thought it was fitting. You'll see that, you'll have heard this in that video anyway. I'm just filming this one first before I do the voice over for that one, and yeah, hence the reason I look like this. Hopefully tomorrow it will be different. Hello, we're here. This is just an intro video to a possibly longer review video, because I had a little idea. I thought it would be fun. It's something that I thought would be good to do with library books, given that I don't have to pay for this little experiment. So what I thought I would do is judge a book by its cover. By that I mean literally go, that looks cool, something about that has drawn me in, and I'm not allowed to look up any kind of synopsis, I'm not allowed to look at the blurb, nothing like that. Pure cover and obviously title vibes. So we have Chris Beckett's Beneath the World a Sea, which, as you can tell, is bloody beautiful. This is generally more what my shelf would look like, even if this isn't that like particularly pop culture illustration style. This is more in line with, did I say pop culture? Pop literature is what I meant. The book cover style anyway, but it's still, you know, it's bold illustrations, which I love, and I love that bright colours, also the colour scheme, because, you know, anyway, I just thought it looked really cool. I don't read enough sci-fi and fantasy. I used to read so much of that when I was younger, and it was always the genre I would go to when someone's like, oh, what do you read the most of? And I would always say, oh, I like sci-fi and fantasy, which usually the answer was actually just sci-fi, but I always said both. But yeah, I always want to add a bit of sci-fi, fantasy, add a bit of genre fiction to my reading lists, and I thought this looked fun. And finally, I'm trying not to look at the back when I do this because I don't know what's on there. So finally we have Je ne sais quoi, The Adventures of a French Woman in London. I thought the cover was just cute and poppy, and I like the illustration style. It's something that I will probably be, maybe stealing some bits of. That's how art works. You just steal bits of what you like. Oh, sorry, that is by Lucy. Is there somewhere where that's not in a font? Okay, the font's not the easiest to read, but I think it says Arno. I hope so. It's in a kind of, it's cursive font, and I can't read. But, like I said, the illustration style was really sweet. I like the idea of just delving into people's lives. It's why I read the pop fiction that I read. I like slice of life, and this is a bit of non-fiction, I guess. I would assume so anyway. I wanted to go for a mix of genres, and not only have I got a mix of genres, but I've got a mix of forms. Sorry, my brain is not functioning today, but yeah, I'm gonna do a little deep dive into the, well, not a deep dive, probably like 5 to 10 minute dive into each of these, and I will see you once I've started reading. Part 1, Je ne sais quoi by Lucy Arnaud. This is a book that opens with just the warmest invitation, making you feel like you're sitting down to share stories with an old friend. There's something so cozy about that, and it really sets the tone for how you will often feel throughout the rest of it. Because it's odd, really. I mean, maybe I'm just a nosy bastard, but I never had a connection to Lucy Arnaud, to her work, before having read this. And yet, I was utterly compelled by the stories she was telling about her life. Even the more mundane moments, she made them so much more. She really elevated them. In style, in form, in just all of it. The beautiful use of light and colour. God, the beautiful use of light and colour. I was enthralled from beginning to end. It just, at every turn. And the thing is, it is really quite quick paced. That's nice for my brain. I like fast pace, even if the contents, it's like, it's hard to explain. So in this case, it's fast paced because you're getting like a lot of short stories effectively, but I like things to be steadily moving at all time. I don't like things to come to a stop because my brain just loses interest. At no point did I lose interest with this. I read it all in one go, and I just didn't want to put it down until I turned that last page. I just fell in love with this book. Like I said, it just feels like you're being told stories by a loved one, maybe even an older relative. I don't think she's that much older. Yeah, do you want to go say hi to Lily? You want to say hi to her? Well, first of all, you're going to say hi to everybody here. Wow. Say hi to everybody? You want to say hi? You don't, do you? You don't want to say hi at all. Hello. Okay, are you going to stay here? Well, you get an excellent view now. Where are you going? You good? Where are you going? Where was I? Oh yeah, that was right. I was saying that I don't think that Lucy Arnaud is that much older than me. I don't think that she's even in her 30s. But there's just a feeling of sitting down. I think just generally with a memoir done like this, there's a feeling of sitting down with a much older relative as they just regale you with stories, because she says near the beginning that she doesn't see her life as particularly interesting, but it is. She's led an incredibly fascinating life, and the way she tells it is stunning. It's like sitting down with somebody who just, every time you learn something new about them, it's even more wonderful, like a little jigsaw Sorry, just something digging into my arm there. I think it's a cat hat. It's probably a whisker or something that's got stuck in my shirt. But there are those people that you meet in life where every time they tell you something new, it feels like a revelation, and reading this book makes it sound like Luciano is one of those people, and it's incredible. But like me, you don't have to know Luciano's work to be able to get so much out of reading this book, just from the pure aesthetic of her art, because that's what this is. It's all just dozens and dozens and dozens of panels of beautiful art, and then on top of that, her storytelling is just brilliant. You can absolutely read this if you're not familiar with her, if you're not familiar with her other work, but I would like to familiar myself with more of her work. She is, after all, a comic artist, and I would be interested to see what kind of things she writes. Part 2, Beneath the World, a Sea, by Chris Beckett. Now, the thing is, I could judge Je ne sais quoi relatively easily by its cover, meaning that, you know, well, cover and title. I allowed myself that much at least, mostly because if you look at the cover of a book, you get the title and the author. But I could gather that it was probably a graphic novel. It has at least an element of memoir in it, and that it was likely to be relatively light-hearted. It was bright and airy, and I was right to judge it by that. I was pretty spot on. But the cover of this offered me nothing. And as I read through it, I thought, well, I think I was about halfway to 2/3 through, and I'm like, oh, I'm curious at this point. What actually was the blurb? Because I was at a point where nothing was going to be spoiled by having read the blurb. Because by the time you're like halfway, 2/3 of the way through, nothing that happens in the book is going to be in the blurb, really, or at least it shouldn't be. So I thought I'd give it a check, and then I read it and thought, yeah, that's the stuff that happens in like the first 20 pages, and I think the book was somewhere between 250 and 350 pages, so, you know, you don't get much out of that. I think it was stuff that happens in the first like 20 to 30 pages is all that you get in the blurb. So even if you did pick this up, you would not be going in with much more in mind than I did. Now, one thing I will say is that this is a much newer book than I thought it was. Something about the cover had the vibes of the, I want to say Masterworks classic science fiction covers. I had one of theirs, the I Am Legend. I no longer have that book. Can't remember if I borrowed it or if I just ended up donating it because I wasn't going to read it again. I want to say I borrowed it, but I don't think I have any of their others. But I've read other sci-fi classics through their stuff before. It's with the yellow border on it. I know it didn't have the yellow border, but something about it made me think of that. So I thought, oh, maybe it's an older book. Only came out a few years ago, 2019 if I remember off the top of my head. Did I write it down? No, I did not. But it came out, yeah, like 2019, 2020, something like that. And I just thought it was older. It has kind of classic sci-fi vibes, and maybe it's just because it's set in 1990, so I immediately think that, oh, maybe this is meant to be written at the time, or set in the close future kind of thing, you know, in the way the Black Mirror is like a kind of either alternate future or it's meant to be the near future, kind of that thing of it couldn't happen right now. But yeah, anyway, it's not. It's more recent book. It just happens to be set in 1990, but it just had classic vibes to it that I can't quite put my finger on. I mean, maybe it's because words like Amerindian are being used, which I, one, had to Google what that meant, and two, I'm so sure that isn't in common parlance anymore. And yes, I'm aware it's being set in 1990, so they would have probably used that word, but it still felt a bit odd. Like, you can still say Native American, but that doesn't feel like the sort of thing that I have the skills and knowledge to dive into. It just felt a bit like it's a word I've never come across before. Maybe it's something that was commonly used maybe a few years ago, that sort of thing. And I don't mean like a couple of years ago, like 2019. I just mean it was a bit more common a few years ago, but I'm not quite old enough to remember. You feel? But to talk about the content of the book itself, it is, I think my voice just cracked, that's fine. It's an utterly strange book to dive into. It's just something that lures you in. It's so odd, but it's fascinating at the same time. I mean, the forest itself is this, there's no greenery apart from what human beings have brought into it. It's all these magentas and like it's all different shades of pinks and purples and blues and that sort of thing. And all the animals aren't fully like animals. I mean, some of the birds seem right, and there's a couple of animals that have made their way from our part of the world, because it's this basically like lost area of Earth that they're in, kind of thing, if that makes sense. But none of the vegetation is the same, and you have to travel through it, and you can't remember. It's all very odd, but it makes more sense if you read. It's a book that is remarkably difficult to explain, but you don't need that explanation to go into it and have a thoroughly good time. But the forest is strange because it's almost recognizable, and that's the way it is with a lot of creatures there. You know, you have the duendes, which is the most recognizable creature of the area. Like, people who know about it know about them, and they're also like a huge plot point. And they're these strange beings. I mean, they already look strange, this sort of almost amphibian vibe to them, or kind of like a froggy kind of vibe with the suckery toes, like a rainforest frog, but they have these weird smooth heads and big V mouths, and they can get into your head. And this is what I thought this was so interesting, because they're not like psychics or telepaths. They don't put thoughts into your head. They bring your own voice out from the back of your mind with all of the thoughts that you don't want to think about yourself, all of the thoughts that you push down, the insecurities and that sort of thing. And it's horrifying in a way that's really difficult to pinpoint, but it is utterly haunting. And I think that's a word that really encapsulates this book. It is haunting in a way that's just but at the hello, is there a creature in here? There is a big girl. And at the same time, there are also creatures, I can't remember off the top of my head what they're called. Hearts. They're these deer-like creatures, and you know, they have seal-like skin. They don't have ears or horns, and they stare at you with these jet black eyes. And all I could think of was the idea of them saying yippee, because in my head, whenever they described them, all I could think of was the autism creature, because of course it's the only thing that was in my head whenever they were around, and it was the only thing that ever took me out of the book. He wasn't to know that. Chris Beckett isn't to know that that's all I'm gonna think. Now, this is a book where you really do, you get everything you need from it, but you just want more of it. And not in a bad way, I mean that in a good way, in a way that you want to ignore the dangers and deep dive into this world, because, like I say, it's just fascinating. It's very odd, but I like kind of trippy fiction. You know, I talked about Beisua's Untold Night and Day last year, and I loved that because it was just weird. I would be curious to see more of Beckett's work. From what I saw from some reviews that I read after I finished the book, that when I was trying to find out how old this book is, because I forgot that the fucking copyright page exists, but apparently a lot of his work is kind of trippy and defies explanation. But what that means is that you could easily go into this book as blind as I did, because unless somebody gives you a beat by beat plot explanation of this book, you're never going to be able to have enough information to fully understand it by the time you go in. And I think even if somebody did explain the plot beat by beat, you just have to read it for yourself. Now, I have a Zelda sat on my script, so I can't do anything about that. You might even be able to see her a little bit. There is no longer a Zelda sat on my script, so these might be something that I make a little running bit on my channel here. I probably won't do a lot of books at once like I did this week, or if I do, it will be shorter fiction. But it's a lot of fun sometimes, just like being able to go to the library and go, well, bugger it, I'm not paying for it, let's just blind get a book or two and just have a little bit of fun. Because honestly, when I am picking out books, unless it's something that I know the author or I have heard about this book in the past, most of the time, if I'm looking at a book, the first thing I'm going to see is the cover. And then, yeah, usually you look at the blurb or whatever and go, ah, yeah, that's what it's about, that sounds interesting. But sometimes it's fun to just go, this sounds super cool, I'm going to fucking read this. This looks interesting just by cover and title alone. So yeah, like I said, there's a good chance you'll be seeing me do this a little bit more often. Either that, or like with Blind Date with the Book, occasionally I will just release a video like this, but I will make it a little bit easier on myself and give myself a bit more time, I think. Next Tuesday we have 2023's first meeting. Hello! Good lord! You fucking launched! You scared the shit out of me, you little bastard! Let me try that again. After I've got my fucking breath, the little bastard cat scared the living daylights out of me. Jesus. Oh. Do you feel better? You watching your birds now? Next Tuesday is 2023's first meeting of the Bad Reputation Book Club. Don't worry, I do the reading, so you don't have to. And the plan is to make that a monthly occurrence. And then, next Thursday, we will be looking at... what? Bargain Bin Romcom by Lena Norms. Now, I will say about the Bad Red Book Club, some things will look a bit different because that was the first video where I started making some changes. You will see that my general vibes, I'm adding a lot of like pixely type stuff, like sort of that faux retro kind of vibe. No real era to it, mostly 80s with a bit of 90s, I guess. But the intro for that is that, but the intro screen, that's new. It's specific for Bad Vet Book Club. But the end screen is the old one, which is just a still image. You're probably not going to notice, but I do. And also, I didn't have the pop filter yet, so the sound quality might not be ideal. Just thought I'd give a little bit of a heads up on that, because I filmed and edited that weeks ago at this point. I filmed it either just before or just after another video on here. Now, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Feel free to like, to subscribe, to leave some comments, some recommendations for some books down below. Take good care of yourselves. Right. I will make her pay for her crimes of scaring the shit out of me. I just checked. You can barely see the fact that she launched herself there, but no, that she really did she flew from one side of the room to the other because she's rude. The shot is also awful. Anyway, you want a little sniff? You want to say hi?